In the heart of an ancient city, long forgotten by time, the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across crumbling stone. Kale, a wanderer drawn to mysteries, stumbles upon something extraordinary, a relic buried deep beneath the veil of shadows. Its surface hums with a pulsating energy, as though it's alive, and the moment his fingers brush against it, something stirs within him. Whispers of a war so ancient, they've been erased from history, flood his mind, painting vivid images of heroism, betrayal, and sacrifice. But here's the question. What would you do if you stumbled upon an object that not only held the secrets of the past, but also carried the weight of your own destiny? Where are you joining us from, and what time is it there? As we dive into this tale of forgotten heroes and untold mysteries, let's explore together what lies beneath the veil of shadows and discover the choices that define us. Will Kale walk away, leaving the artifact untouched, or will he embrace the power it promises, setting off on a journey that could reshape the world? The answer awaits, but first, let's uncover the truth behind this enigmatic relic. Beneath the crumbling stones of Elarion, the catacombs stretched out like the veins of a forgotten heart, dark and labyrinthine. Kale's footsteps echoed quietly as he descended deeper into the earth, guided not by torchlight, but by the faint, thrumming pull of the artifact in his possession. The air grew colder, heavier, and the shadows seemed to press in on him, alive with an unsettling energy. Then, without warning, it appeared, a shadow wraith, its form shifting and twisting like smoke caught in a breeze. Its hollow eyes locked onto Kale, and for a moment he froze. In those eyes he saw not just danger, but something far more unsettling. Reflections of his deepest insecurities, his doubts, his fears made manifest. The wraith lunged, claws slashing through the air, where Kale had been standing just moments before. Instinct took over, and he raised the artifact, unsure of what would happen next. To his surprise, a surge of energy radiated from the ancient relic, repelling the creature with a force he hadn't anticipated. But this was no ordinary weapon. It wasn't merely defending him, it was responding to him, amplifying his will and intent. As the battle raged on, Kale realized the artifact wasn't just a tool, it was alive, in a way, attuned to his emotions, his very essence. With every strike, he felt a strange connection forming, as though the artifact was drawing strength from him, and perhaps even altering him in return. Victory came at last, but it wasn't clean. The catacombs, unsettled by the clash of magic, began to crumble around him. Dust choked the air, and the sound of falling rock filled his ears. There was no time to linger, no time to consider the implications of what had just transpired. Kale fled, the artifact clutched tightly in one hand, the other guiding himself through the chaos. His heart pounded with both adrenaline and dread. What did this strange bond mean? Was the artifact a blessing or a curse? And why did it feel as though it was reshaping him, piece by piece? These were questions Kale couldn't answer, not yet. But one thing was certain. His journey had only just begun, and the weight of the unknown pressed heavily upon him. Each step forward carried both promise and peril, and Kale knew that survival would demand every ounce of courage, and perhaps something more. The narrow tunnels of the catacombs finally opened into a dimly lit cavern, where Kale emerged, gasping for breath. But relief was short-lived. Before him stood Sylara, a rogue scholar with a sharp eye and sharper tongue. Her presence was unexpected, yet undeniable. A woman who carried herself with the air of someone who had seen too much and trusted far too little. "You wield something dangerous," she said, her voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. "And I know what it is." Kael hesitated, unsure whether to trust her or draw his sword. But Sylara wasn't there to fight. She was there to warn. The artifact he carried, she explained, was no mere relic. It was a cursed object, forged in a time when magic and madness intertwined. Its power came at a cost, a toll that few survivors lived to recount. But knowledge alone wasn't enough for Sylara. Despite her warnings, she extended a hand, not out of altruism, but out of curiosity. She offered her expertise in deciphering the artifact's secrets, though it was clear this alliance would be uneasy at best. Kael, driven by desperation and an unyielding mission, accepted her aid. For now, they shared a common goal, even if their methods and motives differed wildly. Their fragile partnership was put to the test sooner than either anticipated. Mercenaries, hired by those who sought the artifact's power for themselves, ambushed them in a dense forest. The ensuing battle was chaotic, a blur of steel, shouts, and shadows. Faced with overwhelming odds, Kael instinctively turned to the artifact, its dark energy coursing through him like wildfire. With each strike, he felt stronger, faster, almost invincible. But the cost became apparent as the world around him blurred, his senses drowning in a tempest of raw power. Sylara watched with growing unease, her earlier suspicions crystallizing into certainty. The artifact wasn't just a tool, it was a temptation, a corrupting influence that preyed upon its wielder's weaknesses. As the fight raged on, her mistrust deepened. Was Kael truly an ally, or merely another pawn, succumbing to the artifact's seductive pull? The lines between hero and villain blurred, leaving both Kael and Sylara to question not only their mission, but also their own resolve. What began as a quest for answers had turned into a test of wills, one that neither was certain they would pass. As the dust settled, the two stood amidst the aftermath, their uneasy alliance hanging by a thread. Yet the path ahead remained unclear, fraught with danger and uncertainty. What choices would they make next, and could either withstand the weight of the secrets they uncovered? The winding path leading to Lindrel proved as challenging as it was scenic. Nestled deep within the folds of a vast, mist-shrouded mountain range, the village was a place where time seemed to stand still. Here, the air carried the scent of pine and damp earth, and the locals lived in quiet harmony with nature. Yet for Kael and Sylara, this journey was anything but peaceful. Each step forward brought with it a weight heavier than the stones beneath their boots. Kael's mind churned with thoughts he couldn't shake. The ambush they had barely escaped still lingered in his memory like a haunting specter. He couldn't stop questioning whether the artifact they sought was truly a source of salvation or merely a reflection of his own fears and doubts. What if this power doesn't just amplify strength? He murmured under his breath, his voice laced with uncertainty, but also the shadows within. His hand instinctively tightened around the hilt of his sword, as though the mere act of gripping it could anchor him to something solid. Sylara, walking beside him, noticed the tension etched into his features. She slowed her pace, allowing herself a moment to study him. Her expression softened, though her eyes held a flicker of something deeper, a resolve tinged with sorrow. "We all carry burdens, Kale," she said quietly. "But remember, the path we choose defines us, not the tools we wield." Her words lingered, but so did the unspoken questions they provoked. As they continued their trek, Sylara found herself sharing fragments of her past. She spoke of a younger self, driven by rage and loss, chasing after those who would misuse the very relics they now sought. Her voice wavered slightly as she recounted how such greed had torn apart her homeland, leaving scars that time could never fully heal. "I vowed then," she confessed, "that I'd do whatever it takes to ensure no one else suffers the way my people did." Their conversation intertwined their struggles, forging a fragile bond between them. For Kale, it offered a glimpse into the motivations fueling Silara's relentless pursuit. And for Sylara, it provided a chance to confront the guilt she had long buried. Together, they approached Lindrel not just as allies, but as two souls bound by shared pain and purpose. As the village came into view, its stone cottages huddled together against the encroaching wilderness. Both felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on them. Somewhere within its misty confines lay the ancient Seer, a figure cloaked in secrets, whose wisdom might unlock the mysteries of the artifact or deepen the enigma surrounding it. Yet, before they could seek her counsel, they knew they had to face the truths that dwelled within themselves. Only then could they truly prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. The revelation shook the ancient halls of Lindrel, where the Seer's words hung heavy in the air. Kale, the young wanderer with a heart forged by hardship, learned of his unexpected destiny. In the Seer's cryptic vision, he was not merely a lone adventurer, but the reincarnation of a legendary hero whose fate intertwined with the world's survival or its doom. This hero, long forgotten by history, had once wielded a mysterious artifact capable of restoring balance to a fractured world teetering on the edge of chaos. Yet, the prophecy came with a warning. Its final verses, the ones that revealed the true purpose of the artifact and the hero's ultimate task, had vanished into the annals of time. The Seer, her voice trembling with urgency, spoke of the Shadow Realm, a place where the lines between truth and illusion blur, where every step taken risks warping the mind and the soul. It was there, amidst the maddening echoes of forgotten ages, that the final pieces of the prophecy lay hidden. But venturing into the Shadow Realm was no ordinary journey. Legends spoke of travelers who entered its depths, only to emerge as broken shells of themselves, their memories shattered and their senses fractured. The realm was alive, feeding on doubt and fear, twisting the minds of those who dared to challenge it. Kale's companions exchanged uneasy glances. Each knew the dangers ahead, yet the weight of the prophecy pressed down upon them like an unseen force. How could they uncover the truth when the very act of seeking it might drive them to madness? The Seer offered no easy answers, only a faint glimmer of hope. The Shadow Realm's secrets were guarded by ancient trials, tests not of strength, but of character and resolve. To succeed, they would need more than courage. They would need clarity, trust, and an unshakable belief in each other. As the group prepared for their perilous journey, the question lingered in their minds. Could Kale truly fulfill this destiny, or would the shadows claim him and his companions before they ever reach the prophecy's conclusion? One thing was certain: the choices they made would shape not only their own fates, but the fate of the world itself. And so, with the Seer's haunting words echoing in their ears, they stepped forward, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them in the darkness. Kael and Sylara thought they had prepared for every possible obstacle as they ventured deeper into the shadowed lands. But even the most calculated plans crumble in the face of the unexpected. As night fell and the forest grew silent, their camp was breached by a figure cloaked in darkness, an assassin, swift and deadly, whose sole purpose seemed to be to stop them at any cost. The confrontation was fierce, the air thick with tension and the clash of steel. Yet amidst the chaos, Kale noticed something that sent a chill down his spine, an intricate mark etched into the assassin's palm, identical to the ancient symbols they discovered surrounding the artifact itself. This revelation hinted at a deeper connection between the assassin and the artifact's origins. Who was this shadowy figure serving? And why did their lord seek the relic so desperately? More importantly, what did this mark mean? And how did it tie into the greater story of the artifact's power? Before Kale could question further, the assassin slipped away like mist, leaving only echoes of their presence and a warning that lingered in the silence. No one emerges unchanged from wielding such power. The words left both Kale and Sylara uneasy. Was this a threat or a prophecy? The artifact's allure had always been its potential to alter fate, but perhaps its true nature was far darker than they imagined. This encounter forced them to confront an uncomfortable truth. The path ahead wasn't just dangerous because of external forces, it also carried the risk of changing who they were at their core. As dawn broke, the duo found themselves grappling not just with the physical challenges ahead, but also with the moral implications of their quest. They pressed onward, knowing full well that every step forward brought them closer to unlocking truths that might change everything and everyone forever. The Ironspine Mountains rise like a jagged wall before our heroes, their towering peaks shrouded in a perpetual mist that seems almost alive. Here, the air grows thin and biting, each step an exhausting challenge against the unforgiving elements. As Kael and Sylara ascend deeper into this unforgiving landscape, the Veil's influence becomes more pronounced, warping not only the geography, but also the creatures that call these mountains home. They encounter beasts twisted by the dark energies seeping through the Veil. Once noble wildlife, now turned into predators with glowing eyes and erratic behaviors. Each encounter tests their resolve, forcing them to rely on one another in ways they hadn't anticipated. In the stillness of the night, huddled around a flickering fire, Kale begins to experience vivid dreams, though whether they are dreams or memories remains uncertain. In these visions, he relives moments from what feels like past lives, leading armies into battle, making impossible decisions, and enduring heart-wrenching sacrifices. These fragments of experience leave him shaken, questioning the boundaries between his own identity and the echoes of those who came before. Is he merely a vessel for forgotten heroes, or is there something deeper at play? The more intense the dreams become, the more Kael wonders if this connection to the past holds the key to their mission, or its undoing. Meanwhile, Sylara grows quieter, her thoughts increasingly consumed by doubt. She questions Kael's sudden alignment with the cause she has championed for so long. Was his initial indifference simply a facade, hiding some hidden agenda? Or is there a darker truth lurking beneath his growing connection to the Veil's power? Her inner turmoil deepens as she contemplates the moral complexities of their quest. If restoring balance means unleashing forces humanity might not fully understand, can the ends truly justify the means? As the weight of their journey bears down on both, the bond they once shared begins to fracture. Yet, in their moments of silence, there is an unspoken acknowledgement of the trials ahead. For all their struggles, they know that turning back is not an option. Together, or perhaps apart, they must navigate the treacherous path forward, one that demands every ounce of strength, courage, and trust they have left. The air thickened as Kale and Sylara approached the boundary of the Shadow Realm, a place whispered about in ancient scrolls, but rarely encountered by mortal hands. Before them stood a group of figures cloaked in tattered robes, their faces obscured by hoods. These were the Exiles, guardians of this treacherous threshold, who had once dared to enter and returned only with scars, both visible and unseen. Their leader stepped forward, speaking in a voice that carried the weight of countless failures. "Turn back now," he warned, his tone heavy with sincerity. "What lies beyond will test your very souls." Kael's resolve faltered for the first time since embarking on their journey. He gazed into the swirling abyss ahead, feeling the pull of the unknown tugging at his spirit. Yet, crossing the threshold was not just about facing danger. It also meant confronting the possibility that they might fail, that the artifact they sought could remain forever out of reach. Was the risk worth it, or had they come this far only to discover that some secrets were better left undisturbed? Meanwhile, Sylara wrestled with fears of her own. She had always known the path would be fraught with peril, yet she hadn't anticipated how deeply the artifact's power might affect Kale. With each step closer, his determination burned brighter, but so too did something darker. A subtle shift in his eyes that hinted at a growing hunger. What if the artifact corrupted him further? What if, in saving the world, they lost the person they loved most? Her doubts gnawed at her resolve, planting seeds of hesitation in Kael's mind as well. But what does one do when faced with such choices? The Exiles' offer to abandon the quest seemed tempting, even prudent. Yet deep down, both Kael and Sylara understood that retreating now would mean leaving behind not just the artifact, but a piece of themselves. The question lingered between them, unspoken yet undeniable. Could they truly walk away from destiny itself, or would they find the strength to face whatever horrors awaited within the Shadow Realm? As the Exiles watched silently, the tension hung in the air like an unbroken thread, pulling the two adventurers toward a decision that would define not only their journey, but their very identities. The Shadow Realm is a place where reality warps to mirror the innermost thoughts and emotions of those who dare to tread its paths. For Kael and Sylara, this realm becomes both a test of character and a crucible for their resolve. As they venture deeper, the shadows twist around them, conjuring visions born from their deepest fears and memories. These illusions are not mere tricks. They are crafted to exploit the vulnerabilities lurking in the hearts of our heroes. Take Kale, for example. He's greeted not by monstrous creatures or dark threats, but by the smiling faces of his loved ones, his wife, his children. They appear before him as vividly as if they were standing in his own home. Their laughter echoes through the air, tempting him to leave behind his dangerous quest and return to the safety of their embrace. It's an offer he knows is false, yet it feels so real that every step forward requires an ironclad will. Kale must remind himself why he began this journey, to protect those very people and push on, even when the temptation to abandon his mission grows stronger with each passing moment. Meanwhile, Sylara faces a different kind of trial. Her shadowy adversaries take the form of her past failures. She sees herself as she was years ago, hesitating at critical moments, making choices that led to loss and regret. Each memory cuts deeper than the last, forcing her to confront the doubts she's carried for so long. But these visions aren't meant just to torment her, they are meant to break her spirit. Yet, instead of crumbling under the weight of her regrets, Sylara finds strength in them. She realizes that her failures have shaped her into the resilient warrior she is today. With each painful memory, she reaffirms her determination to uncover the truth and ensure no one else suffers because of ignorance or fear. Together, they press on, their paths interwoven by a shared hope. The Shadow Realm tries to pull them apart, to shatter their resolve with illusions tailor-made to prey on their weaknesses. But what the realm underestimates is the power of their purpose. For Kael and Sylara, the truth isn't just something they seek. It's something they're willing to fight for, even against the most insidious forces within themselves. And perhaps in the end, it's not the external dangers that define them, but how they rise above the battles waged within their own minds. The journey ahead will be fraught with challenges, but their perseverance serves as a testament to the unyielding human spirit. Even in the face of despair, hope can illuminate the darkest corners. What lies beyond the Shadow Realm, only time will tell, but one thing is certain. Kael and Sylara are closer to discovering the truth than ever before. As the journey into the heart of the Shadowed Realm deepens, Kael begins to feel an undeniable force radiating from the artifact, a pull so powerful it seems to resonate with his very soul. At first, the change is subtle. He notices an ease in his movements, a clarity in his thoughts. But soon, the artifact reveals its true nature, unlocking dormant abilities within him that defy the boundaries of the world they know. With a mere thought, Kale can mold the shadows around him, weaving them into shapes, barriers, or weapons. He can manipulate the realm's fabric, bending it to his will, altering the very essence of reality. Yet, this newfound power comes at a cost. As Kale grows stronger, a creeping detachment from the world around him begins to take root. His senses sharpen to an almost overwhelming degree, but his connection to the tangible world diminishes. To Kale, the lines between reality and illusion blur, leaving him teetering on the edge of a precipice. Sylara notices this change first. Her partner, once grounded and steady, now seems distant, his gaze lost in the infinite possibilities of his power. Her concern deepens as she watches him struggle to differentiate between the real and the fabricated. The tension between them escalates as trust begins to erode. Sylara fears that Kale might lose himself entirely to the artifact's influence, becoming something unrecognizable. She questions whether his intentions align with their mission, or if the artifact's pull has clouded his judgment. For his part, Kale feels misunderstood, caught between his desire to protect and his growing alienation from those who once stood by his side. The once unshakable bond between them fractures under the weight of doubt, suspicion, and fear. In the midst of their struggle, the artifact continues to whisper promises of untold strength, tempting Kale further into its grasp. But with every step forward, the cost of his power becomes more apparent, a price neither he nor Sylara may be willing to pay. Can they find a way to restore their fractured trust, or will the artifact's influence drive them irreparably apart? This internal conflict serves as a mirror to the broader dangers posed by the artifact. Its power, while seductive, exacts a toll that threatens not just individuals, but the balance of the realm itself. And as the story unfolds, viewers are left pondering the true cost of such immense ability. What would you sacrifice for power, and at what point does it become too much? The air grew heavy as Kael and Sylara entered the shadowed chamber, its walls adorned with faintly glowing runes that seemed to pulse with an ancient energy. Before them stood a council of ethereal beings, translucent figures shrouded in shimmering light, their voices echoing like whispers from another world. These were the remnants of the forgotten heroes, guardians of secrets long buried by time. Their presence filled the room with both awe and unease, their eyes piercing through the pair as if reading their very souls. The council's leader, a figure whose form flickered like a star on the edge of extinction, began to speak. You tread paths meant to remain hidden, yet destiny has brought you here. With each word, the weight of history pressed down upon Kale and Sylara. The council revealed a truth that shook the foundations of everything they believed. The forgotten heroes had once been a united order, sworn to protect the world from chaos. But a great betrayal, a schism fueled by hubris and greed, had fractured their order, scattering their power and leaving behind only echoes of their glory. At the heart of this betrayal lay the artifact Kale and Sylara now carried. It was no mere relic, but a catalyst for change, capable of reshaping the world. The council tasked them with a choice so monumental, it could define the fate of all living beings. They must decide, should the artifact be restored to its rightful place, reigniting the power of the forgotten heroes and risking the same corruption that tore them apart? Or should it be destroyed forever, extinguishing its potential for both good and evil? This decision posed a test not just of courage but of trust. Kale believed in restoring the artifact, convinced that its power could heal the wounds of the past. Sylara, however, feared the consequences of unleashing such force into the world again. Her doubts gnawed at the fragile bond they had forged, threatening to drive them apart at the most critical moment. As they pondered the council's words, the burden of their choice weighed heavily upon them, testing not only their resolve, but the very essence of their alliance. In this crucible of uncertainty, one question lingered. Could two souls bound by fate rise above their differences to safeguard the future? Or would their paths diverge under the weight of impossible decisions? The answer lay not in the stars above, but in the strength of their convictions and their willingness to confront the shadows within themselves. The air grew thick with tension as Kael and Sylara faced each other, their shared history hanging heavy between them. Kale's brow furrowed as he wrestled with the visions clouding his mind. In his dreams, he saw a world remade by the artifact's power, a world where fractured kingdoms stood united, where borders dissolved into harmony, and where peace reigned for the first time in centuries. It was a tantalizing vision, one that tugged at his heart and planted seeds of doubt in his resolve. Could this object, so long feared and reviled, truly become a beacon of unity? But Silara's voice cut through his musings like a blade, sharp and unyielding. "Kale, do you not see the danger we face?" she pleaded, her words laced with urgency. "History has taught us what happens when such power falls into the wrong hands, or even the right ones. Every great empire that rose on the promise of progress ended in ruin because they underestimated the weight of what they wielded." Her eyes burned with conviction, reflecting the countless stories of destruction she had studied, the warnings etched into ancient texts and whispered across battlefields long silent. Their disagreement spiraled into a heated exchange, each word layered with meaning and emotion. Kale argued passionately for preservation, believing the artifact could rewrite history instead of repeating it. He spoke of hope, of breaking cycles, of offering humanity a second chance. But Sylara countered with cold, hard truths about the fragility of trust and the inevitability of corruption. "Power always corrupts," she reminded him, "and if left unchecked, it will consume everything in its path." The standoff stretched on, neither willing to yield. Their bond, once unshakable, now strained under the weight of their conflicting beliefs. Kale began to question whether his visions were merely wishful thinking, a desperate desire for something better driving his judgment astray. Meanwhile, Sylara grappled with the fear that destroying the artifact might rob the world of its last hope for redemption. As they stood there, locked in stalemate, the weight of their decision threatened to overwhelm them both. What they chose next would define not only their fates, but the fate of a world poised on the edge of change. And in that moment, both began to realize that the true test lay not in the artifact itself, but in their own hearts, and the sacrifices they were willing to make. The air grew heavy as whispers of the unknown filled the shadows around them. Before Kale, Sylara, and their companions could finalize their plans, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and an eerie silence blanketed the realm. From the encroaching darkness emerged shadow-born creatures, twisted, ethereal beings with eyes that burned like embers in the void. Their forms were spectral, yet their claws carried the weight of inevitability. In seconds, the group was forced into a desperate battle, one they knew they couldn't afford to lose. Kale, clutching the artifact tightly, became the focal point of their resistance. Its power surged through him, granting him abilities far beyond his own, but at a cost. The artifact's influence began to seep into his mind, clouding his judgment and amplifying his anger. Each strike against the Shadowborn fueled its pull over him, drawing forth darker impulses that threatened to consume his very soul. He lashed out not only at the enemies before him, but also at Sylara, who stood firm despite the chaos. "Surrender the artifact," she urged, her voice steady despite the peril. Her eyes locked onto his, unflinching even as he turned toward her, the item glowing ominously in his grasp. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though the artifact had won, that Kael would succumb to its corruption. But Silara's unwavering belief in him and her swift intervention snapped him back from the brink. She drove away the darkness clouding his mind, reminding him of what truly mattered, their shared fight for survival and redemption. This harrowing experience deepened Silara's conviction about the artifact's corruptive nature. It wasn't merely a tool of power, it was a curse, capable of unraveling even the strongest wills. Yet, it also reinforced something else, a fragile but undeniable trust between Kael and Sylara. Their bond, forged in adversity, proved stronger than the artifact's sinister pull. As the dust settled and the threat receded, the group pressed onward, now more determined than ever. They knew the path ahead would be fraught with trials, but they also understood that together they could overcome anything, even their own inner demons. What lay beyond the next bend in this shadowy realm, only time and their unyielding resolve would tell. The journey led Kael and his companions to an ancient, enigmatic place known as the Hall of Echoes. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and as they stepped inside, a cacophony of whispers enveloped them, soft, insistent voices that seemed to stretch across the fabric of time itself. Each murmur carried a story, a memory, or perhaps even a warning. For a moment, Kael felt overwhelmed, as though the weight of every choice made by those who came before him pressed down on his shoulders. But then, amidst the chaos, one voice rose above the others, a clear, resonant tone that spoke directly to him. It was then that Kael heard the final verses of the prophecy, words he had longed to uncover since the beginning of his quest. Yet what he discovered was not the triumphant declaration of victory he had anticipated. Instead, the prophecy revealed a truth that cut deep into his soul. The true hero is not the one who wields power, but the one willing to sacrifice it for the greater good. This revelation struck Kael like a thunderclap, challenging everything he thought he knew about his destiny. For so long, Kael had envisioned himself as a warrior, destined to rise against the forces of darkness, armed with strength, skill, and unwavering resolve. But now, the prophecy suggested that greatness lay not in conquest, but in surrender, of pride, ambition, and even the very tools he believed defined him. How could this be? How could someone give up their power when the world needed champions to wield it? The idea shook him to his core. Was he prepared to let go of everything he'd trained for, everything he'd fought to achieve, simply to fulfill this cryptic vision? As the echoes faded, leaving only silence in their wake, Kael realized that his path forward would require more than courage or strength. It would demand something far greater: selflessness. And while the notion terrified him, it also sparked a glimmer of hope, a recognition that perhaps true heroism wasn't about being invincible, but about making choices that transcended personal gain. This newfound understanding left Kael standing at a crossroads, questioning not just his role in the unfolding narrative, but also the nature of heroism itself. What does it mean to truly protect others? And more importantly, can he find the strength to walk this unexpected path? The air was thick with tension as Kael and Sylara approached the heart of the shadowed valley, where the guardian of the veil loomed. This ancient, fearsome entity bore the weight of countless centuries, its form forged from the darkest fears and doubts of those who had dared to seek the artifact before them. It was not just a creature of myth, it was a reflection of every failure, every hesitation, and every shattered dream that had ever stood between mortals and their quests. As it emerged from the shadows, its voice thundered like a storm, challenging their resolve and testing their courage. Kael's grip tightened on the artifact, but instead of allowing it to fuel his strength, something profound shifted within him. He paused, taking a moment to reflect. The lessons they had learned along their journey, the sacrifices they had witnessed, and the bonds they had forged illuminated a path forward that did not rely on brute force or dominance. With determination blazing in his eyes, Kale made a choice that defied expectation. Rather than wielding the artifact's immense power to overpower the Guardian, he surrendered it, willingly surrendering his own strength. This selfless act sent shockwaves rippling through the battlefield, not only weakening the Guardian's physical form, but also shattering its very essence. For the Guardian thrived on fear, on weakness, and on the belief that power must always be wielded to dominate. When Kale chose sacrifice over conquest, when he embraced vulnerability as a form of strength, the Guardian faltered. Its hold over the realm began to crumble, freeing not just Kale and Sylara, but also the countless souls trapped in its shadow. In that moment, a powerful truth was revealed. True strength is not measured by what one can conquer, but by what one can let go of. It is the courage to step back, to give up control, and to act for the greater good even at great personal cost. This revelation transformed Kale and Sylara, solidifying their place as heroes whose legacy would echo through the ages. Their journey proved that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one's choices define the course of destiny. And so, with the Guardian vanquished and the realm reborn, the path ahead opened anew. But what trials awaited them next, only time would tell. The air grew heavy as the artifact's power dissipated, its once terrifying energy now reduced to nothing more than a faint whisper. The Shadow Realm, sustained for centuries by the relic's dark influence, began to unravel, tearing apart at the seams. Kale and Sylara had only moments to act before the entire world they stood in crumbled into oblivion. Sprinting through twisting corridors of shadow and fractured light, their escape became a race against time itself. Each step carried them closer to survival, but also deeper into the chaos of a collapsing dimension. As they ran, Kale's mind raced just as fiercely. For so long, he had viewed himself through the lens of prophecy, bound to a predetermined path of greatness or destruction. But now, as the pressure of destiny lifted from his shoulders, he realized something profound. His worth wasn't tied to any grand vision or fate. It was his choices, his growth, and the relationships he forged along the way that truly defined him. This revelation struck him not with fear, but with a sense of liberation, a clarity that allowed him to embrace his own agency. He wasn't merely a pawn in a cosmic game. He was a living, breathing person, capable of shaping his own story. Meanwhile, Sylara grappled with her own inner turmoil. From the start of their journey, she'd harbored doubts about her role in Kale's life. Was she strong enough? Could she truly make a difference? The weight of her uncertainty had lingered like a shadow over her every decision. Yet, as they emerged closer to safety, she found solace in the truth she'd come to know. Her guidance had been instrumental in helping Kale find his way. She had faced her fears, trusted her instincts, and played an indispensable part in their success. Peace settled over her heart at last, replacing doubt with quiet confidence. Their escape wasn't just physical, it was emotional. With each leap over crumbling ground and each dash through disintegrating portals, Kale and Sylara learned that the most transformative journeys aren't always the ones we take across vast distances. Sometimes, the greatest adventures are the ones we undertake within ourselves, and though the shadow realm might fade into nothingness, the lessons they carried would last a lifetime. When Kale and Sylara returned to the mortal realm, they stepped into a world far different from the one they had left behind. The land, once teeming with life and harmony, now bore the scars of division and strife. In their absence, the power of the artifact they had sought to protect had fractured, scattering its energy across the land. Factions emerged, each believing that possessing even a fragment of this ancient power would grant them dominance over others. Kingdoms warred, alliances crumbled, and the people suffered under the weight of endless conflict. Yet, as they gazed upon the shattered landscape, something stirred within them, a resolve both fierce and unyielding. Kale, with his steadfast determination, and Sylara, guided by her empathetic heart, refused to let despair take root. They remembered the trials they had endured together, the lessons learned in unity, and the strength drawn from their shared purpose. Drawing upon these experiences, they vowed to bridge the divides that had torn the world apart. It was no longer about reclaiming power. It was about rebuilding trust and forging bonds that transcended fear and prejudice. Their journey began modestly, reaching out to the smaller communities first. Among these villages, where the brutality of war had yet to fully take hold, they found allies, ordinary people who longed for peace and prosperity. Together, they spread a message of hope, reminding others of the strength found in cooperation rather than conflict. Slowly but surely, Kale and Sylara began to weave a tapestry of unity, one thread at a time. But challenges loomed large. The powerful factions, driven by greed and ambition, saw their efforts as a threat to their control. Battles erupted, testing the resolve of those who stood with Kale and Sylara. Yet, even in the face of opposition, they remained steadfast. They knew that true change would not come quickly or easily. It required patience, perseverance, and an unwavering belief in the potential of the people around them. Through their actions, Kale and Sylara became more than warriors or heroes. They became symbols of a brighter future, proof that even in the darkest of times, hope could shine through. And so, armed with courage and conviction, they pressed forward, determined to write a new chapter in the history of their world, a chapter defined not by division, but by unity. Kale stood still for a moment, his breath catching as he stared at the veil of shadows. Once a source of dread and chaos, it now hung lifeless, its power drained, its malevolence silenced. The air around him felt lighter, as though the very weight of the world had lifted. Yet, in that silence, Kale found himself reflecting not just on what had been lost, but on what remained. The forgotten heroes who had given their lives to preserve hope would not fade into obscurity. Their stories, their sacrifices, were etched into the fabric of this fractured reality, waiting to inspire those brave enough to remember. At his side, Sylara stood resolute, her eyes reflecting both the sorrow of battles fought and the promise of new beginnings. Her presence was a reminder that even in the darkest hours, bonds could be forged stronger than steel. Together, they embodied resilience, not perfection, but the courage to move forward despite scars that lingered. As Kale turned to her, A quiet determination burned within him. "We've walked through fire," he said softly, "and we've survived, but survival isn't enough. It's only the beginning. Their journey ahead would not be easy." New challenges loomed on the horizon, born from the ashes of the old. Yet, Kale knew that together, they carried something more powerful than fear or doubt, a shared purpose. They had faced down darkness and emerged wiser, humbler, and unbreakable. With each step forward, they carried the legacy of those who came before them, ensuring that their sacrifices would never be forgotten. And so, beneath the veil of shadows, where once only despair had reigned, a flicker of light began to grow, not because the world had changed entirely, but because two souls, burdened yet undeterred, chose to keep walking toward the unknown. Because sometimes, the truest acts of heroism aren't found in grand gestures, but in the quiet decisions to persevere, one day at a time.